the largest regional accelerator program and early stage VC in the MENA region. And this is the last episode we have of our FinTech special for the StartSmart webinars. We've tried to give a focus on the different countries that we operate in and give you full insights of the FinTech landscape. And this webinar series, we'll be talking about how the FinTech ecosystem in Bahrain is growing with much promise and potential for the future. And today we'll be discussing the journey of Bahraini FinTech startup, Rain, and hear key insights from the other ecosystem stakeholders representing the investor, regulator, and ecosystem builders side. The investor being MEVP, the regulator being Central Bank of Bahrain, and the ecosystem builder being Bahrain FinTech Bay. So I'd like to invite the panelists to please introduce themselves, beginning first with Mohammed from Rain.
Thank you, Saleh, and Flat 6 Labs for having me in this webinar, along with your distinguished guests. I'm very excited to participate with you all. Here's a little brief about me. My name is Mohammed Khalid Atiq. I am the GM of Rain Financial, which is, I'm proud to say, the first central bank licensed crypto asset custodian in the region. I have around 15 years of experience in the banking and fintech industry. I graduated with a bachelor's degree in banking and finance from University of Bahrain. I also have the international diploma in compliance from Manchester Business School. I am also a CAMS certified specialist from, which is basically the ACAM certificate in anti-money laundering. I am also a FIBA FIU anti-money laundering certified associate from Florida International University. And I have completed the cryptocurrency and disruption program from the London School of Economics University. And I'm very excited and looking forward to everyone's contribution. Thank you.
All right, great. Next up, we have Ali from MEVP.
So hello, everyone. Thank you very much, Saleh, for having me. And my name is Ali Al-Majdoub. I work at Middle East Venture Partners. So MEVP is a regional VC firm. So we've been around for more than 10 years. We're sector agnostic. We have offices in, Bahrain, Riyadh, but headquartered in Dubai. Also other offices in Abu Dhabi and Beirut. We invest in the MENA region as a whole, also including Pakistan and Turkey. We're sector agnostic, so we invested in, fintech. Obviously that's one of the hot sectors, especially here in Bahrain, in addition to other sectors, B2B, B2C, web, medtech, edtech, consumer stuff, e-commerce, media, content, and whatnot. Prior to MEVP, I also worked at Bahrain Development Bank and consulting as well. Before that, I have a bachelor's degree from Ryerson University in Toronto, Canada, in business management and entrepreneurship. And while I was there as well, I worked in a couple of startups, working on the sales side and business development side. So I guess I've been around in the ecosystem, whether from a startup side, from investor, from incubator, or even maybe playing a consulting role as well. So.
All right, great. Next up, we have Badur from the CBB, Central Bank of Bahrain.
Thank you, Saleh, for having us and for having me, and for thank you to Flat 6 Labs. And I think it's a great opportunity to always showcase success stories here in Bahrain and to just promote FinTech overall. My name is Badur, and I'm part of the FinTech and Innovation Unit at the Central Bank of Bahrain. And essentially what we do is we oversee the sandbox, our FinTech sandbox, and we also collaborate with regulators across the world and the region in order to promote new FinTech opportunities and new regulations.
Great. Thanks for being with us, Badur. And next we have Badr from the Bahrain FinTech Bay.
Yeah, thanks, Salah, for having us today. So my name is Badr Satter. I head business development and acceleration programs at Bahrain FinTech Bay. Bahrain FinTech Bay is an ecosystem builder for the FinTech ecosystem. We partner with most of the financial institutions and banks in Bahrain. We have over 30 founding partners in our network. And we really act as a ecosystem builder that looks at supporting the FinTech ecosystem across a whole host of different verticals in Bahrain. And we have operations across several jurisdictions in Jordan, in the US, and in Singapore. On a personal level, before joining Bahrain FinTech Bay, I previously worked as an accelerator program lead at a cloud acceleration program, and then also at the Economic Development Board of Bahrain. So thanks for having us.
So also I'd like to tell our listeners that we will have a Q&A segment at the end once we're done with our initial questions for the panelists, and they'll all be happy to answer you directly. So any questions that you have, you can just start submitting them from now, and we'll answer them towards the end of the session. So to kick it off with, I think we'll start off with the startup, which is Rain, the cryptocurrency exchange. So Mohammed, can you tell us more about how Rain was founded, and what is the vision in Bahrain and within the region that you guys have?
Rain was founded by AJ Nelson and Joseph Delago, along with co-founders Abdullah Al-Muaifel and Yahya Badawi. The founders actually met online initially with one common goal, which is to bring cryptocurrency to the Middle East in a regulated and safe way. They saw potential in the region due to the fact that it has been greatly underserved, and there was a huge market gap with significant potential. So the founders were in talks with many regulators back in 2016, and in 2017 identified Bahrain to be the best fit to launch their company due to the fact that that Bahrain is always in the forefront when it comes to innovation and embraces new technology. Also, the Central Bank of Bahrain really shined in the 1970s by transforming the kingdom into the region's financial hub, and has now focused on becoming the region's leading fintech hub. Not to mention, they have exceptionally wise leadership whom support all of the government's innovative initiatives. Rain operates right now as a crypto brokerage, which is a very simple way for people to buy and sell crypto. I would say, if I dare, that Rain is kind of like Coinbase in its simplicity and user interface. Also, Rain's operations are Sharia compliant. We don't participate in interest. We don't give interest for storing crypto or fiat on our platforms, and we don't charge interest. All of our crypto offerings go through a Sharia review before being listed on our platform. This is very important for many investors in the region, and we are proud to enable them to invest in crypto with peace of mind when it comes to Sharia compliancy. As for our goal, well, our goal is basically to be the Coinbase of the Middle East and have presence across the GCC, providing safe and secure crypto to our clients, and at the same time complying with all regulatory requirements. Of course, if anyone wants further information on Rain, they can download the app or visit our website on rain.ph.
Great. Could you just tell us about what some of the major challenges are that Rain has faced so far as in their startup journey, and also just getting around regulations and setting up?
With regards to challenges, well, I would say, what startup doesn't face challenges? It's part of the journey. We embrace challenges, and I personally believe that challenges make you stronger and they help you grow, especially with if you manage to overcome them. At the end of every storm, there's always a golden sky. But I would say, if I had to identify one or two challenges, it would probably be, well, from the regulatory standpoint, no real challenges. The CBB has been super cooperative. But I would say that the talent pool in the region, when it comes to software developers and crypto professionals, it's still a new market, and the talent pool can be quite limiting. But we have seen the younger generation delve into crypto and technology at such a young age that we are hopeful that this will not be a major problem in the future. The other challenge I would say is probably competing with the global big players out there, such as Coinbase and Binance. We, as a CBB regulated entity, have very high standard of requirements when it comes to KYC collection, which is basically obtaining identification documents from our clients before allowing them to access our platform. We are required by the CBP to conduct enhanced due diligence, EDD, on all our clients, whether they are big or small, high traders or low traders. Whereas in other international crypto exchanges, locals here in Bahrain, for example, can easily set up an account online with those exchanges with minimal identification documents. Of course, this has raised some questions from our clients as to why Rain is requiring so much KYC documents, while other international exchanges just ask basically for the bare minimum. And a way of overcoming this challenge will be to educate the people as to why such high quality EDD measures are necessary, and also at the same time, try to find some sort of middle grounds with the central bank on what KYC can be accepted and or exempted from our clients. Regulators, of course, have a big role to play here if they want companies such as us to compete on a global scale. They need to thoroughly understand the industry and evolve and adapt with new technologies as they come to light. Of course, that being said, the Central Bank of Bahrain has always been super supportive, and we hope to continue this healthy relationship with them for many years to come. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Mohammed. I think what we'll do now is we'll move on to the venture capitalist side, which is Ali from MEVP. And just to get an idea, Ali, what is it that attracted MEVP to invest in the fintech vertical specifically? And what developments do you think we can expect to see in the fintech ecosystem and sector regionally in the coming years?
First off, before I answer, how's my microphone? Is it clear? Can you hear me properly?
Yeah, it's
okay.
Clear.
Yeah. Okay. So first off, I would respond with a general answer. Typically, what successful venture capital here in the MENA region is has a very simple premise or a simple value proposition that I would say. Typically, what we would see is offline to online digitization or transitions. So typically, whether it's in the GCC or the region or any other place in the world, a lot of sectors and a lot of services are very offline, fragmented. The service that you're giving to the client is not proper. I mean, and what you would find in terms of really successful startups are startups that are able to digitize this process, right? Providing a 10x experience, a 10x experience that is better, 10 times than what is, in the market. So let me give an example, right? So, very basic stuff. So, taxi, that's the easiest example, right? So taxis, Uber and Careem. So before in the MENA region, taxis are very difficult to actually deal with, right? If you go outside and stand on the road and you wait for a car, you'll never get one. You have to actually get the phone number. If you could, in order to actually identify a phone number, I mean, sometimes you actually need to get referred. And then if someone's traveling to Jordan or Saudi, you need to have a guy that you typically call. And حتى هنا في البحرين, in Bahrain, like I live in Rafah, and during the high school days, when I don't have a license, I don't have a car, you'll have a guy that you would pay a couple of dinars that would take you to, Manama or whatever. So, and then digitizing the whole process where you have, on demand through your mobile phone that is always connected, the car that you need with the size that you need. If you need a child's car, child car, you could get it instantly. Food delivery as well. I mean, it's a very simple thing, but it's even B2B e-commerce, for example. This is a sector that we're seeing very growing now rapidly. So in the MENA region, right, where you don't have proper supply chains, me as a small merchant or a small store, I need to deal with maybe 10, 20, 30 agents. I need to deal with 10, 20 different warehouses. I do not have access to the manufacturers and suppliers properly. And then I could streamline it. I mean, that's what Alibaba did, right? So, before Alibaba, if you're a small business, it's very difficult to actually deal with Chinese manufacturers. It was only the big clients that would actually send people to China. And then Alibaba just came in and aggregated all the different suppliers, and then you could see all the different reviews and what's tested and what's not, and everyone's testing it, and you could get instant access, right? So the way that we, a small business owner, the way that they would bring in import stuff from China, let's say before Alibaba and after Alibaba is, yeah, you cannot even comprehend, how difficult it was prior to that. And it's the same thing in the financial services as well, right? So just digitizing these whole processes and making them 10 times better is exactly what we're looking for in any business that we make. And the easiest way to do it is just using technology that is, available, and, fine tuning it to the MENA region, whether it's, who are the right partners to work with, who are the right regulators to work with, who's the right talent to bring in, and then how to actually serve the rest of the MENA region, right? Because it's a very fragmented market. You have different jurisdictions. The GCC alone, which is considered a little bit more cohesive, is still, you have six countries, six jurisdictions, and then within each country you also have different regulators. You have different free zones. Saudi Arabia as well, right? And so sorry.
It's very fragmented.
So yeah, so yes. So this is a general answer, I guess, to any sector in any field in the MENA region, right? So if you could come in and streamline a service that is already available and make it much more accessible, then you have a really good business in the MENA region. So how would I measure that on fintech? So it could range from anything. So it could range from payments, right? Just providing proper payment gateways and access to, whether it's just getting the proper integrations with the local banking networks. So here in Bahrain, it's Benefit, or maybe in Saudi it's Meda, and then you have the banking the interbanking networks, the local ones. You have the GCC ones, and then you have Visa, Mastercard, and then having access to the different e-commerce sites, right? So that just providing all of that is an immense value added to the customer. Whether it's maybe banking, right? Just having a very simple online banking solution for the clients, giving access to finance, right? So crowdfunding and crowd investing, this brings more liquidity and more access. Something that you had to call your friends and family. It's offline. You don't actually have access to a large retail investor base. Financing for SMEs, right? Before, now because you have you're digitizing payments, now you have more data, and now you could do your credit assessments, you could do your credit analysis, then you could actually provide financing and more services on top of that, right? You could rebundle a lot of different things that were offline and only attainable to the large corporates that have large teams internally to build to provide financial statements, to manage relationships with the investors or banks, or even have large amounts to make it feasible for the bank, right? Because banks were doing a lot of stuff offline, so they need to hire a lot of people to do it. So anything that you could digitize and make easier for the consumer, moving it offline to online, that is exactly what we're looking for. And Rain here is a great example, right? So prior to Rain, if I wanted to actually trade in crypto, first off, there's no way of using my local bank accounts, local banking networks, because nothing is regulated by the CBB, and you cannot, function. You could do maybe peer-to-peer, but then you have to be one of those early adopters of Bitcoin, and you have to, build a network, and then you need to, see how can you trust others, and how can you build your knowledge in terms of, offline or peer-to-peer trading in the crypto market. Or maybe you pay hefty fees, credit card fees, just to transfer your money to international exchange like Coinbase or Kraken or whatever. So Rain came in, right? They fixed the regulation issue. They're working now with the local banking networks. They're making it much more easier for the consumer. They're digitizing all of it. It's 10 times better, and that's why it's a great business. And Bahrain, sorry, I feel like I spoke a lot, but I mean, Bahrain, as Mohammed said, the fact that it's a financial hub, there's a lot of talent, especially on the banking and administrative side, that startups, whether from the region or from Bahrain or internationally, could come in and utilize that. And I think there's still a lot of work to be done in further integrating the banking sector, the traditional banking sector, that brings a lot of experience, in terms of compliance, risk, credit assessment, managing, portfolios, managing financing, along with the digital world, right? So I think we're still at the very early stages of that mix, and hopefully we'll see even more startups, that takes the similar route to what Rain did as well.
Yeah, speaking of that, would you say that other VCs should pay closer attention and like keep an eye on what's going on in the Bahrain fintech ecosystem?
Yeah, the success begets success, right? So the more great examples such as Rain that you'll see in here, the investors would look at Bahrain more and more. Once you have a really good successful story, then you could get a second, a third, and a fourth, and khalas. All investors are laying their eyes on the market and seeing what's happening. It
becomes sort of like a domino effect at that point, right?
Sorry?
It becomes like a domino effect.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move next to Badur Al-Mullah from the Central Bank of Bahrain. What steps have been taken on the regulatory side to make Bahrain an attractive hub in the region for fintech startups to establish over here rather than in the other GCC states?
I think the unique thing about Bahrain is that we take a centralized approach to almost everything, especially when it comes to fintech. First of all, there's a single regulator, which is the central bank. So anything finance related, including insurance, falls under the umbrella of the central bank. Our team specifically works very closely with a lot of public sectors, including the EDB, which is the Economic Development Board, and the private sector, including a lot of financial institutions and FinTech Bay. And I think Bader can attest to that. But going back to FinTech and how it started here, I think what was important is that FinTech became kind of a national agenda, which was important because there were a lot of reforms within the central bank, which initiatives, which allowed Bahrain to become, say, at the forefront of FinTech, or to actually put it on the map. First of that, the first initiative was the sandbox and the introduction of the sandbox in mid-2017. Following that came the creation of the FinTech unit. So what that meant was that there was a dedicated team who would oversee the sandbox. And what the establishment of the sandbox meant was that there was a gateway for startups to speak to the regulator, and not just startups at the stage of scale-ups, early stage startups, anyone who had an idea, and anyone who essentially was not ever regulated or has ever spoken to a regulator before could come and speak to the regulator and actually get their opinion. And a part of the sandbox was also another reason we actually introduced it was to also interact with innovators and startups, and to actually learn from them, and they would learn from us as well. And that would actually help us update our current regulations and introduce new ones. So we have our in-house team doing the research to introduce new regulations, but we also took the initiative to interact with the ecosystem for us to get more of a feel of what to get out of their innovations and how to properly monitor them. So one way that happened is that Rain was one of actually the first few startups that were admitted into the sandbox. We worked very closely with them and a number of other companies that were in the same field, and we were able to come up with regulations that had to do with monitoring crypto asset platforms. And as a result, once Rain graduated from the sandbox and completed their tests, we were able to license them. So in that sense, in terms of the initiatives that we've introduced a number of regulations, including open banking, insurance aggregators, digital finance, you name them. And apart from that, we also collaborate on a regular basis with a number of regulators from around the world in the form of tests. So for example, we're part of the Global Financial Innovation Network, where we actually engage with a number of regulators from around the world in the form of cross-border testing. So a firm is able to actually conduct their sandbox test in a number of jurisdictions at the same time. Another way is that we also collaborate, and we're in a number of different forums and organizations to actually further our research and learn about new innovations such as CBDCs, anything new in the market. We try to keep an eye on. And yeah, as much as we can, we try to engage with the ecosystem. We actually try as much as we can to get the financial institutions to speak with new innovators. And one way that we've actually tried to combat that or tackle that issue is with the introduction of our new digital lab, which was just launched in October 2020. It's called FinHub 973. And the idea behind it is to have a platform where startups are pre-vetted and pre-screened, and they're part of the platform. And banks or other financial institutions would be part of the platform as well, and they can kind of interact there without any formality in the sense of getting into production or commercial agreements. So in that sense, yeah, that's pretty much what we've been doing in terms of fintech initiatives. And I think it's gotten to put Bahrain on the map in terms of fintech.
And what would you say if you've noticed any mistakes that have been made or things that could be improved upon on the startup side that they could do when it comes to, you know, registering or licensing with the CBB as a fintech company?
So I wouldn't say mistakes. I'd just say that the earlier they speak to the regulator, the better, because a lot of the times some startups would speak to us when, say, for example, they have their solution up and running and all of that, and it may not necessarily fit under the regulations that we've introduced. In some cases, they'd go through the sandbox, we'd study their solution, and there is a possibility that we'd actually amend the regulations to fit their solutions and other solutions that would be similar. In other cases, that wouldn't be the case. They'd have to kind of pivot their solutions to fall under our existing regulations. So I guess the sooner they speak to us, the sooner they educate themselves on the current regulations and the current ecosystem, the sooner they'd be able to kind of execute their solution and be regulated and kind of serve the market.
Yeah, it makes sense. We get that a lot on our side as well, where usually they'll kind of jump straight into development without even understanding what the core function of the product really should be and who the customer is and the services.
Exactly.
So, and then they have to go back and start from the beginning with their development.
Exactly.
All right, great, thanks. Moving on to Better from Bahrain FinTech Bay. Bahrain FinTech Bay is one of the ecosystem builders specifically towards the fintech vertical over here. Can you tell us more about the role that you guys play as an ecosystem builder?
Yeah. So I mean, I think it's a good question. You know, with all of these players in Bahrain, how do they work together? How do they fit with one another? And I think to really understand it, you kind of have to take a step back and see where we were 2 or 3 years ago, right? So we were in a position where the central bank took a very clear and strong kind of initiative to really push for innovation, push for fintech, and push for improving the regulatory environment to make it conducive to have fintechs exist, right? And so there was a very big push from a government and from a regulatory point of view, but still from the private sector, the banks were still not there. There was still a lot of work that needs to be done, right, to get up to that level. So I think that's really when we started to come into play and really tried to find our role to work with the central bank and work with the local, ecosystems to see how we can support, right, and how we can push forward the agenda that Bahrain has set for fintech innovation. And I think what it boils down to is quite a few pillars where we get involved in and where we do our part to try to support. So primarily, FinTech Bay is backed by 30 plus founding partners who are mostly financial institutions, telecoms, and tech companies in Bahrain. And with our founding partners, we've kind of outlined a few different verticals that needed to be developed in Bahrain or needed further work on. So when we look at that, first off, we can take education as one case, right? So we run programs with Georgetown University, and we have lots of smaller programs that we run to help improve the general knowledge within the ecosystem. And a lot of our attendees of these courses are professionals or young professionals from the banking industry, right? I think another area which we look at is in research and thought leadership, right? So we have a research team and we do publications on, on quarterly basis around different areas which we feel needs a little bit more exposure and a little bit more development. Another area that we look at is around acceleration and incubation, right? So for acceleration, we run kind of, let's say, on a high level, two kind of types of programs. So we run smaller programs, which we do in partnership with the banks and with the financial institutions who are our partners. So typically, those are very tailored to a specific need that they have. They're not very they're based on those kinds of requirements. And then the other kind of programs that we run are more towards the what we almost call them, we call them our venture acceleration platform. So it's basically bringing global fintechs which are at scale access to the Bahrain and regional markets, right? So how do you get these big players to start looking at Bahrain, partnering with the banks and so on? So we kind of facilitate a lot of the communications between the banks who have identified some of the problem areas or the areas that they're looking to develop and so on. And we connect to them to the best-in-class global players and try to move that forward, right? And then another area, I guess, which we get involved in is around the incubation space. So we have an incubation space. Currently, we have around 45 to 50 companies, primarily fintech and what we call fintech plus, which are startups which support the fintech ecosystem and fintechs directly. And it's one of the largest, if not the largest, cluster of fintechs in the region. And I think that's also very advantageous for our founding partners, is to be able to come into the office and to meet some of these fintechs and startups. And actually, around 50%, I think, of the companies that are going through the sandbox process actually choose to be part of FinTech Bay, and that includes Rain. So Rain were previously one of our early residents in our space. And they stayed there until sometime last year, yeah, I mean, they were part of the community that we have, and still are really part of the community that we have. But I think that they quickly, it's a good thing. They quickly outgrew our space, and they started off asking for 5 desks, and then 7 desks, and then 10 desks, and then we were like, guys, we're running out of desks here. Maybe you should start considering other options. Thankfully, they're still in the building. They just moved a couple of floors down, but they're still part of the kind of broader FinTech FinTech Bay family, let's say. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of kind of areas where, as FinTech Bay, we like to get involved in, and largely it's driven by what our founding partners are asking us to kind of work with. And it's very helpful, again, to kind of work with a very very forward-thinking regulator, which kind of understands the challenges which these fintechs are facing, and is always open to communicate with the startups. And I think that that's kind of the number one kind of comment that we get by fintechs who have set up in other jurisdictions and then they come here, is that yes, it's actually very easy to talk to people here. Yeah, so I mean, I think in a nutshell, that's our role that we play within this ecosystem.
A good problem to have when one of your incubatees are growing so rapidly that you're figuring out where to get desks from, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they were one of the earlier guys, and now we're starting to see it with some of the other fintechs that we have, and I think it's just an excellent problem for Bahrain to have, right?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, actually, yeah, we started with around, let's say, 10 employees, and right now we're up to 50 or 70 employees. And I'm proud to say almost 70 to 80% of those employees are all Bahrainis also. So yeah, we are growing, and that's a good sign.
Yeah, and totally new jobs for the country as well, right? Like, we don't usually get people being able to go into that kind of diversification of skill sets. So great for the country. So going back to you, Mohammed, I guess you kind of alluded to it earlier, but from your experience of launching and operating in Bahrain, what further steps do you think we could take, not just on the regulatory side, but even as a country and as an ecosystem as a whole, to sort of ease the transition and continue making Bahrain an attractive hub in the fintech space in the region? I know you mentioned previously about, you know, software developers and that form of talent. We've got a company that was based out of Tunis that's actually launched and setting up right now in Bahrain called Go My Code, which its main objective is to, you know, quickly fill that space when it comes to creating talent specifically amongst developers. But if you'd like to expand on any other areas you feel that we could improve on.
Yeah, look, I have no doubt that under the kingdom's leadership and guidance, Bahrain will excel in this field. That being said, I believe, of course, as you mentioned, I've already touched on a few points regarding this in my previous segment, but let me add by saying that we must always keep an open line of communication with the regulators and help them also understand our business model and needs. We know this field can be very risky to the CBB. They are kind of worried about cryptocurrency and the transactions and things of that aspect. But as a startup, we need to be given the freedom to operate and explore the market and basically make money. So in order to do that, we need to show the regulators the safety measures we have in place, from advanced world screening softwares to transaction monitoring tools, and reassure the central bank that RAIN has not and will not compromise on security and compliance. Look, cryptocurrency is just now dawning across the Middle East. It's in its infancy here. And I believe education is key. And we as leaders of this industry in the region have a responsibility to educate the masses on the benefits and uses of cryptocurrency. And we actually have a plan for this in 2021, where we plan on going on road shows, making videos, giving lectures across businesses, ministries, and even universities to spread awareness of this new technology and awareness about cryptocurrency. Thank you.
Great, thanks. And is there any other points that any of the rest of the panelists would like to leave on as a final note before we shift on to the Q&A segment? All right, so I guess we can, I've been told that there will also be a quick pop-up survey that might appear for some of our listeners. So I think it's just like, it takes like a second. It's just a rating from 1 to 5 or something. And I guess we can like go through the questions now. So there's a question from Ruwaida Al Arabi going to Mohammed, which is,
I can actually jump in to answer that question. She's asking about the crypto device that's in Bahrain FinTech Bay, but that's actually not RAIN's. It's not actually RAIN's device, and I think that company is still going under the CBB's sandbox, and I think that they're at a point right now where they're not allowed to operate, and so hence until they get the full license, and so that's why that the devices over there have been turned off, because they've expired that period. So sorry, Mohammed, to jump in.
And then you've got another two from someone called Imtiaz about what is the way to open a crypto account and purchase cryptocurrency, and he's also asking whether cryptocurrencies can be stored offline. Yeah,
definitely. You can visit rain.bh or go to the App Store or the Android Play Store and download the RAIN cryptocurrency app. You will need to provide identification documents to prove you are who you are. And then we will activate your account within around, let's say 24 hours. And you can buy and sell Bitcoin, Litecoin, XRP, Ethereum on RAIN's platform. And you can pay using your bank or even a credit card. But you can actually store your cryptocurrency offline. You can basically just transfer it from your Rain account to what we call a cold storage wallet, which you can buy around $20 from eBay. So that is possible, yes.
Next one's up for Better. I think you already kind of explained this earlier, but it was maybe you could just elaborate on how the Bahrain FinTech kind of facilitates in that conversation between banks and other institutions and the startups.
Yeah, I mean, so primarily, I think we support fintechs connecting to banks through our two basically types of acceleration programs, whether it is the early stage programs or the late stage programs. So for the early stage programs, an example of that is, so we're running, for instance, right now, we're about to kick off a program which we're running with BISB Bank, which is looking at developing, marketing solutions for them to use internally, right? And so we connect with the relevant tech startups and have them directly work with the banks on those specific challenges and problem areas that they have identified. And then the other area is with our late stage venture acceleration program, which I mentioned earlier, where companies that we sign an agreement to work together on, we start going through a roadshow where we introduce them to banks across Bahrain, and with those we have countless number of projects that are ongoing right now. At this point, I think we're at around between 25 to 30 projects which are actively being engaged in with the banking industry. So yeah, those are kind of the main areas that we do support. Yeah, and then obviously on typical normal days, we would have lots of workshops and networking events that happen in BFB, where our residents and our fintechs have an opportunity to chat with the banks that are visiting and so on. Obviously, because of the current situation, they're all virtual, but yeah.
And someone else has asked, which I can actually jump in on as well. They've asked if anyone has successfully graduated BFB's acceleration program and reached the market. And actually, two of their startups are now in our sixth cycle, one being Urento, the other one being My Gold Souk, both of which are going to be launching in the market within the next month. And you guys will be able to see them pitch at our demo day, which should be around the 3rd of February.
Yeah, can I just add one point to that? I mean, I think this is a really good example of continuity inside the startup ecosystem that we have in Bahrain. So both of the startups Salah mentioned, right, were part of a program which we ran called the Women in Tech program with the Standard Chartered Bank. So Standard Chartered Bank partnered with Bahrain FinTech Bay to run this program. It was the first time that they run it in the region. And it took startups which were at a very early stage and within those 8 weeks really helped to develop them to a stage where they were ready to come out, to join a later stage, let's say a next stage program, which with the Flat Six Labs. So it's good to see how they link up together and how the ecosystem helps each other kind of push forward.
Next up, we have a question directed towards the regulator, Badur. They wanted to ask, how can other regulators or foreign fintech companies collaborate and integrate with Bahraini regulators and ecosystem?
So in various ways, I guess. So in terms of the regulators collaborating, we're part of a number of organizations, and we collaborate in the sense of sharing knowledge, for example, or also, like I mentioned before, the cross-border tests, where we communicate and we kind of have a joint regulator approach with those companies and whether or not they can test in our sandboxes at the same time. In the sense of foreign companies integrating with the Bahraini ecosystem, there's also a number of ways. One of the ways, the majority of our sandbox companies, or a good percentage, are companies from abroad, not local ones. FinHub 973 is another way for foreign companies to join and kind of interact with the community, or like say the fintech ecosystem, without having to physically be here, for example. It's just a matter of what their solution is, what they're interested in, and what type of players or key players that they'd be interested in speaking to in the region, and hopefully there'll be a way for them to collaborate.
And so the domain for them to be able to get onto FinHub 973 platform would be what? FinHub973.com or?
Yeah, FinHub973.com.
All right, great. Next one goes to Ali. They're asking, do you think that FinTech will end up replacing traditional banks?
Yeah, so I guess I could answer that question by saying, well, first off, I guess you could categorize the FinTech startups into two kinds, right? So there are startups that are kind of combating the traditional banking sector, so they're going against them. Most notably the neobanks, the challenger banks, right? So these are trying to kind of directly compete with the traditional banking sector. And then on the other hand, you have fintechs that are more complementary, right? So they're providing services towards the traditional banking sectors. They're trying to work with the traditional banking sectors. And most of what you would see in terms of the existing fintech space is more collaborative than directly competing against, I would say. I think just like any other sector, 5-10 years from now, I think it would be very, very weird to think about, oh, I just need to go to the bank just to get access to a simple document or to make a very simple banking transaction, especially when you have, a lot of new technologies that could enable, opening up a bank account through technologies such as eKYC and cryptography and security and APIs and a lot of different services that are now available, or technologies that enable traditional banks and new banks to serve the client. But I mean, what we will see is, what we already see is, the traditional banking sectors are much more aggressive in terms of how they want to serve their clients, right? They're all coming up with new mobile applications. They all have APIs now. They all want to integrate with other fintechs. They want to see how they could utilize the technologies available to better serve the client, because they know that new disruptive financial technologies are going to make it more difficult for them unless they can innovate. And even basic stuff, such as what is the process for opening up a bank account or applying for a debt facility, whether it's from the traditional banks or from the new competitive or challenger banks. It is much more simpler now, and there's benchmarks that are released, whether it's if you take a look at the UK or the States, which has an even more mature market, benchmarks that are released every year or so, where you could see what's the average time for opening up a bank account now versus last year versus the year before. And every year you could see the improvement, whether it's from the challenger banks or the traditional banks, the Chase, the Citibanks, the Bank of America, or whatever. So I think it's more on that side, right? They're going to be more collaborative. You'll see the traditional banking sector changing, as a result of the new financial technologies and the new challenges that are coming in.
Yeah, I mean, if I can just add to that, I mean, I think that I agree fully with Ali's comments, right? And what you're seeing now is basically the line between challenger bank and traditional bank has pretty much eroded away, or is in process of eroding away, right? With people being able to, digital KYC, digital onboarding and streamlined KYC and all of that. I think a lot of the differentiating factors between one bank and another have been, moving away, and it's all about the digital experience. No matter if you're a digital bank or a neo bank, or if you're a traditional bank. Because I mean, I think in the past, right? So what defines a good bank, right? In the past, it was customer experience. And how do you get good customer experience? It's about how many branches you have, how many tellers are open at any given times, how close is how many ATMs do they have, right? And all of these things don't really matter as much as they did, right? All of this goes away. So now it's about, okay, so what kind of fintechs can I integrate into my app to give the most value add. So whether that is giving you a PFM, like a personal finance management or investments management, or a robo getting it involved, or all of these different areas, right? And as you kind of add more things, that's how you differentiate a good bank between another bank. And it's no longer going to be about whether it is a traditional bank or a neobank or whatever.
Great. So moving on, we have a question directed towards Badur for fintechs interested in equity-based real estate crowdfunding. Are there any regulations supporting it as of now, and when will the sandbox application begin, if not?
So we do have crowdfunding regulations, equity-based as well. It's just a matter of whether or not the solution fits under that or not. So you might have aspects in the solution that don't fit under regulations. And in terms of, and if that's the case, then the company could go and apply to the sandbox. And for a sandbox, we don't really, it's not on like an application window basis, it's just on a rolling basis. So the application is always open. It usually takes us around 14 days for you to get a response from the central bank, whether or not you're admitted into the sandbox. So yeah, I guess the best way is to just contact us and see whether or not the sandbox fits, or the solution would fit under the existing regulations.
Next up, we've got questions for Mohammed. He's asking, how did Rain overcome the problem of rarity of local talent, such as programmers and cryptocurrency experts?
Well, lucky for us, the founders are actually very experienced programmers and cryptocurrency experts. But I would say the best way to find local talent is through the regular networks, such as LinkedIn, social media. We check out certain projects that people have started in the past, and we try to contact them and see if they are interested in joining Rain. We have quite a very tough process of hiring. They have to go through a unique interview process, and that interview process has certain, let's say, small tests embedded in it. And then that is how we can identify the most suitable fit for the company. But it's challenging, but at the same time, it's not impossible. And we are finding high quality staff here and there.
You're pretty popular. Most of the questions are for you over here. So the next one is, what pro certificates are good to start a career? I guess professional certifications are good to start a career in fintech.
That question is for me. Well, there are a lot of online courses. For example, the one I just recently took is from the London School of Economics University. They have quite an in-depth course into cryptocurrency and blockchain and other disruptive technologies. There's also a master's degree you can obtain, I think, from Cyprus University that specializes in cryptocurrency. So a simple Google search will get you the results you need.
Also, if you don't mind me just jumping in there, we also, at Bahrain FinTech Bay, have courses with Georgetown University, and we have actually for 2021 partnerships to bring in at least 2 or 3 other world-renowned universities to partner. And I think one of the kind of advantages really is that the programs that we run are very much bespoke, with teams in Bahrain working directly with professors in Georgetown and in the other universities that we work with. So it's not completely offline. It's a hybrid of online coursework and tasks and materials and along with the offline. And also, besides just the generalist fintech kind of certifications, at Bahrain FinTech Bay, we're working on developing more streamlined and niche offerings in terms of fintech courses, whether it is in AI, whether it is in blockchain, or so on. So yeah, there's a lot that's coming forward in the next year from BFB in this space.
So Mohammed, is there any intention that you've seen so far for someone to create a local cryptocurrency, and what is the expectation about the Saudi UAE crypto announced? Do you know about that? Because I don't know what they're referring to.
I think referring to Aber here. So it is a very ambitious project, and I hope all the GCC, to be honest, in the future, create a unified cryptocurrency for the entire region. So it is not that far-fetched. It's an ongoing process, and Arbor is coming.
Great. So the last question, and probably the most technical question here, that's directed to anybody that can answer it, which is actually from one of our mentors, Hamid Al-Fahad. Long term, is FinTech moving towards an open centralized protocol instead of standalone FinTech products / banks? So move towards open standards or APIs and FinTech just being an enabler to non-FinTech products. Directed to anybody that can answer.
Yeah, I guess if I understand the question properly, right, we're definitely seeing a little bit of decentralization of financial products. Most notably, the easiest example are the super apps, right? So whether it's Careem with Careem Pay, or WeChat and Alibaba, or Grab or Gojek. Also, now every startup, once you serve your clients, right, and once you start aggregating a lot of data, you could start actually providing, rebundling a lot of different services. And we're already seeing, a lot of different startups that start off providing maybe, B2B e-commerce or B2C e-commerce, or providing, basic services such as ride hailing or food delivery. Suddenly now are able to provide, financial services, financing, wallets, payments, and then, but also at the same time, from the central bank or from the regulatory perspective, it's really good that, more access is now available for retail or consumers, but also at the same time, how do you ensure that it's properly regulated? So I definitely see that, financial regulations are going to be a little bit more decentralized, more companies and startups and digital, technology-enabled startups or companies are going to be providing more financial services. So how do you regulate that? How do you ensure? And it's already happening, right? So I think there's already a large bottom-up push towards that. But also at the same time, how will regulators respond, and how do they, manage all of that? That's definitely, and we see different countries, in different ways of how they're handling it. Even something simple as wallets, right? Whether you take a look at super apps in Pakistan or Egypt, with some of our own companies such as Baikia and Halan. They're providing, wallets now. They're providing payment solutions. They're trying to work with the telcos as well. And at the initial stages, the governments are all fine with it because they solve a very big problem that already exists, right? A lot of business is done in the offline dark market. So you need to formalize all of that. And that this is one of the best tools, right, of bringing them in, right, through the introduction of these startups and new services and technology. But central banks and regulators will not sit by as well, and they'll see how to regulate it. I don't know. I mean, we'll see how it happens, but there's definitely a push. It's especially a large bottom-up approach, and I think small, countries such as Bahrain, because they're a little bit more astute towards what's going on, and they're trying to, regulate it early on through the sandbox program. So I don't know. Even API, so I think Bahrain is the only country in the region that actually now regulates. It kind of demands retail banks to have APIs. I know that other countries are not as excited for this as Bahrain is, and I mean, I think everyone understands that this is the future, but when will they rate it? When will they kind of enforce the banks to adopt APIs and open banking and to work with the the startups and the and mobile apps and the B2C, B2B platforms in the region? That is yet to be seen. But yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, we're definitely, moving towards that direction, if that's a good.
Yeah. So to summarize, basically, it's not an if, it's a when, basically to happen.
Yeah.
So that was the last question, and this brings the session to an end. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us, and I'd like to thank all our panelists, Mohammed, Badr, Ali, Badur. It was great having you join us today. Also, if any of our listeners, if you want to, stay tuned for other content like this in the future, just click the subscribe button, like the video. And if you're looking to apply for funding of your startup, you can go on to www.flat6labsbahrain.com and you can apply to our 7th cycle. Applications are open now and they will be closing by February 14th. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you, Salah. Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.